And so, yet another entry into the hidden history of the African American warrior. You know, I've been thinking for the last 2 days about this guy, Dangerfield Newby. Remember I told you about him? The 6'2" mulatto whose father was Scottish, who freed him, and he ultimately was there in Harper's Ferry with John Brown. You know, and as I indicated, he was the free man and the first to die in that battle there prior to the Civil War. You got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we're talking about a guy who had every reason in the world not to fight. He was free, after all. He was Negro. His daddy was Scottish. But fought he did. And I've shared with my staff here just the personification of those enslaved. Sometimes we'll say the slave, and it implies that somehow or another it's some kind of new being, a person not worthy of any kind of personification. No eyes, no ears, no feelings. He's just a slave. These were Americans, ladies and gentlemen. And one Dangerfield Newby was very much so American and very much so in love with his beautiful Harriet, who was still enslaved by a man in Virginia. Now, I can only imagine what was going through his mind. Well, imagine, plus be able to pull up some of the historical information around him. You see, he was the first to die in that raid on Harper's Ferry by John Brown. He, along with 5 other African Americans, was part of that raid. And when he died, he found the letter that was read so eloquently by Whitlock. The letter from Harriet: "Dear husband, I want you to buy me as soon as possible. For if you do not get me, somebody else will." I guess imagine. So it's been more than evident that he had the letter in his pocket, and he was certainly headed to free his beautiful Harriet. But how? Could he buy her? Would the enslaver sell her to her husband? Or was he thinking something else when he raided that Harper's Ferry, the ammunition dump? Was he not thinking that, okay, what he'll do, and John Brown's plan was to arm all those enslaved? It was all of those enslaved in and around Harper's Ferry knew that there was going to be some kind of attack, which is why Robert E. Lee and Union forces were heading down the track simultaneously. Now, they didn't know about John Brown's attack, that it was going to be actually on the ammunition dump was going to be there, but they were heading that way because the Negroes were getting unruly. It's ironic that John Brown attacked. But back to Dangerfield Newby. I don't doubt that his plan was to John Brown get the guns and make his way to the plantation and free his beautiful Harriet. His was an incredible decision that he had to make as a man who loved his wife. It was, the choices were very simple. The plan was very simple. And it was this: no one's going to sell my woman. I will do any and everything possible to see to it that that doesn't happen. And he did. He gave his life, unfortunately. And unfortunately, his beautiful Harriet, upon his death, was in fact sold and sent further south. No word of her story, and we're researching that because, ladies and gentlemen, you need to know. There are so many folks who look at this era and look at this whole idea of enslavement and so forth and come out with this kind of downtrodden, ooh, pitiful me, pitiful me. I see it completely different. Completely. What more worthy way for Dangerfield Newby to give his life than fighting for his family? It's an honorable thing. I don't doubt that the child that probably Harriet had was told about his brave father, say the least. All right, let's get to it here, folks. A lot to cover, short period of time. The House now is about to vote again on the tax reform. First one in 3 decades or so. hopefully I'll be able to explain to you what it means. And that might take some challenge because I don't know what the heck it means. I really don't, folks. The only thing I can compare this with is what it was like during, during the Carter years and during thereafter the Reagan years. I was not in business when JFK started the process to lower the tax rate, corporate tax rate, from 90% to 70%. Johnson ultimately went ahead and did that. Of course, I don't mind telling you, I was very awake when all that took place. Now, I was very interested in business even then as a young scamp. But as I see this unfolding, and I know, Ro, you've got all the charts, the graphs, you're able to calculate. If you can call us, and if you want to ask us how it's going to affect your taxes, we could tell you that. But everything I'm seeing here, folks, represents to me what I have seen over the years of those individuals who are at the highest levels of the economic level. Rich folks. Their primary interest is how do they keep more of their money, and how do they spend more of the middle class and poor money. Now, if you want to take issue with that, fine, please, you can. You see, I know that no greater demographic in this country puts more money in circulation than those individuals who can't afford it, the poor. I mean, there's a reason why you have the rich and you have the poor. The reality is that typically if you don't have the poor, then you wouldn't have the rich, because the rich benefits from providing the services and goods to the poor, one can argue. Now, of course, you've got some other things that come into play with inheritance and so forth, and that's another discussion altogether, and it's discussed in this tax bill, because now, ladies and gentlemen, the real estate tax now has been cut, meaning that you can pass on millions, and yes, the Trump family will benefit. But I want to get back to this and just kind of lay it out for you. Because I'm laying it out for myself. I'm evaluating this and I'm looking at this. I've got we actually don't have the bill. I've not seen the bill. You've not been able to get the bill. No. Is it in writing? It's got to be in writing. I've heard other senators say that they are not privy to the entire bill, the one that now has been negotiated. Chuck Schumer had some rather interesting things to say about the bill when they're on the Senate floor, when the Senate took the vote last night. Well, you take a listen to what he says here, and keeping in mind he's Schumer, the Democrat. No Democrat is voting for this bill, which is not a good thing, actually. I felt the same way about the health care bill, and no Republican voted for that. If we've reached a point in this country whereby party is more important than the country, then we're in deep trouble. Getting something that's bipartisan is important, to say the least. Just voting party lines, to me, just for the sake of party lines, is really quite absurd, and you can't represent your constituents and do so, in my view. But be that as it may, here's Chuck Schumer criticizing the vote that was about to be taken on the should I say, conservative-led tax reform.
A new poll this morning from CNN found a majority of Americans against the bill. Why? The bill provides crumbs and tax hikes for middle-class families in this country and a Christmas gift to major corporations and billionaire investors. So let me be clear. This tax bill will be an anchor around the ankles of every Republican. If they haven't learned it yet, they're going to learn it next November. Republicans will rue the day they pass this bill, and the American people will never let them forget it. What has been sold as a job creator and wage booster will, of course, do little of either, as companies are already initiating stock buybacks worth hundreds of millions of dollars instead of hiring more workers and raising wages. Ultimately, the Republicans have taken what they call a once-in-a-generation opportunity on tax reform and squandered it on corporate welfare and tax cuts for the rich. According to the Tax Policy Center, The top 1% of earners in our country get 83% of the benefits. The top 1% get 83% of the benefits. What about the other 99% of us? The raw numbers are staggering. It's an indictment of the Republican tax plan. It's an indictment of where the Republican Party is headed, into the arms of their billionaire paymasters. The numbers reveal what this bill truly is: a tax scam that will rob middle-class families to pay for corporate tax breaks.
Well, let me just tell you, and I don't think it does the Democratic Party a good service by having this political banner. The Republicans, blah, 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 will be tied around the ankles. Schumer and Pelosi need to come off of that. This idea that somehow or another they're going to pay politically because the voters are going to go back and vote against them, and therefore they should change their vote, is just silly to me. I think Schumer could have very well explained how the trickle-down has yet to trickle down. You do realize, ladies and gentlemen, we've been at this trickle-down theory, going back to Ronald Reagan, actually. I'd stop short of going back to Lyndon Banks Johnson, because that wasn't exactly a trickle-down. You see, had it not been for the war on poverty, there's a lot of middle class that would not be middle class this day. I know that. Many others know that, too. The middle class has not figured it out yet, especially you guys who consider yourselves conservative. You've not figured out yet that the war on poverty and welfare does more to support you than any trickle-down from a rich guy. You're far more likely to benefit from a food stamp, actually. Trust me. And or Medicaid refunds than you would be from a trickle-down from Donald John or from anyone else. You really are. You don't know how. I don't mind explaining it. You see, ladies and gentlemen, let's just take the food stamp, for instance. You do realize that these individuals, because you have food stamps, grocery stores now get great benefit. In other words, people who ordinarily were not able to afford food if they didn't have food stamps wouldn't be shopping there. So therefore, the profits on those foods actually go to the grocer. Now, he has to get the food from somewhere, and obviously it's going to be trucked in. And, of course, you've got farmers, which is why the farmers squawked when oxy-conservatives started talking about cutting the food stamps. I know that they're credit cards now, but I just use food stamps. It's easier. But my point is simple. The middle-class individual who manages that grocery store, the stock boy who's stocking it, stock man, the butcher, all those individuals are reaping the benefit of those tax dollars spent in the way of food stamps. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the poor don't spend money with the poor. They spend money with the middle class. Now, I ask you once, how many rich are going to walk into that same grocery store, and how many baskets you think they're going to buy there? Trust me on this, not nearly as many as that indigent family who feels for the first time, look, we can go in and get meat because we've got food stamps, whether you like that or not. Not very good spenders they are, for whatever reason. But I can give you the list on and on. I can tell you the Social Security workers. Same with those individuals who are receiving a Social Security at this point, and are of age. They will go more than likely and buy their drugs from some rich company. But the reality here is that they're spending their money in a Walgreens or a CVS, and that drug store, the druggist there, middle class, upper middle class, is going to reap the benefit of those tax dollars that's now being spent in the way of being Medicaid, Social Security. You see, there are those, oxy-conservatives have been working on this for quite some time. When the limb bubbles of the world say, oh, yeah, the top, income tax is paid by the top 1%. You remember that? I disproved that all over this. Oh, they're the only ones paid, and most of the 90% of the income of the taxes is paid by the top 1%. Well, okay, so now if you take his theory and you give the top 1% a tax cut, 10%, you do understand you're still going to need the taxes, right? When you hear people say, how do you pay for it? In other words, those many four-lane roads that head out into the upper suburbia to the gated neighborhoods, where most most indigent can't live. Those, off of those traces, the tax dollars that went in to spend for those 4-lane highways, that money, coming from those gas taxes and the like, not from their income tax by no means. You do realize that those individuals living in those great mansions and compounds make very little contributions to that. Very little, comparatively speaking, to those individuals who are average taxpayers. We do more driving. I'm just saying. You don't have the liberty of having perks when you're middle class and below. You don't have the hookup. You know what I mean? When you're rich, you can get things wholesale. You have access to that. You might have a restaurant, you might have a car dealership, you might have whatever. And besides that, you've got more companies vying for your business. Or for that matter, you're in the same circles as the people who own the companies. You go to the same clubs. So when you look at this, it's not class warfare to me. It is just how it is and how it has been. But what you have here is a manipulation. In my view, the manipulation of the information. That's how we arrived at this place whereby, the tax cuts for the corporations is going to be permanent. By the way, I'm the CEO of several corporations. I say, ooh, wonderful thing. Great. Not necessarily good for the country. The idea here is, Ro, is that will trickle down.
That's the intent.
That's the intent. And this has been, let me just tell you, I consider Talk Radio has been priming this for quite some time, and some of you have bought it. I welcome you to call, and let's have the debate.
What evidence is this based on?
Well, that's exactly it. Because if that was so, then we wouldn't be where we are. You see, what has hurt this country, ladies and gentlemen, goes back, actually, to, Ronald Reagan, actually. Started with Ronald Reagan. It was preempted by George Herbert Walker Bush when he raised taxes. But then the Newt Gingrich-led conservative Congress and Bill Clinton started again. And I'll tell you what they started, and that was tax cuts for offshore accounts. Offshore manufacturing. Still there. Still there. President Barack Obama and the Democratically led Congress tried to stop that tax cut for offshore. They failed. The Republicans held them up. And this is, all you got to do is go back and don't take my word for it. Just look in 2008 after January 20th, in the spring of 2008, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying is when President Barack Obama came up with the first bailout. And this idea that buying American would be given some perks, the Republicans jumped up and down because that was not part of the free market. However, back to this illusion that, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. Those who have money and those who have the companies who you think will spend money with you and will make things better, you got to look around you and see how many places have closed up and realize quite the contrary is true. When you look at Main Street, USA, you see a lot of shuttered doors and falling in buildings. I hate to sound so bleak, I'm in business, but I see it. And I know why I see it. In many cases, it's because of mega companies, be it the Walmarts or some huge conglomerates, created an environment that was so hostile with predatory business practices, whereby a small hardware store can't survive. That combined with the fact that many of the suppliers were put on notice that you can't supply it to that little small grocery store or that little small hardware store. They undercut in many cases. I found this in radio when I first went into radio 20-some-odd years ago as an owner. You know, you had the major companies, the clear channels, who are now iHeart, or the alphas, who will go in and just undersell just for the sake of running out some poor little small radio station owner, and then gobble them up for a little or nothing. I was there, I know it. When you say trickle down to me, if you're gonna make the argument and try to convince Rip Daniels, you've got to give me some indication that that has happened in your neighborhood. Give me the example. Look, I don't doubt that I can tell you right now, having a Nissan in Canton, it's a great thing. Having the Toyota plant in and around Yazoo, good thing. And there's no doubt the economic impact is there. There's no doubt. And look, you can't complain about that. However, you do understand that it was the little small businesses, the little small refineries, the little small support businesses that really, really was the engine. I mean, it's good to have the company. The companies in those back in the day were represented the future. In other words, you were able to retire, get a pension, go watch, and it maintained that community, right? That was the thought. But those ancillary businesses, those little small businesses that supported the people who worked there, those little businesses that just grew up, the little cafes, you know, the little inns, the little diners, the little shoe repair guys, mom, pop, you know, those businesses where the workers would go after they got off work, nightclubs, joints, hairdressers, barbershops, doctors. You got me? You don't have that now. The economy's changed now, unfortunately. Which makes it very hard for the trickle to trick. Which makes me think it's more of a trick than a trickle. And when I hear oxyconservatives like Brian and others say that, I ask myself, I wonder if the little guy gets this. You realize there was a tax cut before during the Bush administration, 2001. You know what happened with the money? It's evident. I can show you. Big businesses right now are sitting on huge, huge amounts of savings, which is a good thing for them. Good things for us. You know, and I'm going to tell you why. You know, the reason why right now those of us in business, even small business, are apprehensive is because we don't know what the hell Congress is going to do. It flips, it flops in 4 years. Everything that we thought would exist, be it regulation or taxes, can automatically change just in a matter of 2 years. Come 2018, and Congress becomes Democrat, all bets are off. So how do you pursue business in that environment? I mean, I'm talking huge businesses. I mean, consistency is what works for business. You know, it doesn't. Once you're able to make some projections and predictions based upon, I guess, what used to be some economic norms, they're not anymore. If I sound pessimistic, I am. I don't know where this is going, bro.
And for you to be in business and to...
I don't know where this is going.
To say that is interesting.
On the one hand, I see that housing starts is up. Not in the South, however. Especially not in Mississippi. Up and down the eastern seaboard. It's not up in Las Vegas, I can tell you. Probably up out in California. Many of the so-called blue states.
Northern California.
But that's a good thing. Because I want you to know housing starts is a good indication that hopefully there is some recovery. That housing starts, according to what I'm reading here, is up as much as it was 2007. Interest rates are low. You would think that folks would be breaking ground. Well, not nearly as much as what it should be, I can tell you that, in my view. So, look, if you've got some evidence that the trickle-down has trickled, because, look, the trickle-down has started back, like I said, when Ronald Reagan was in the White House. If you've got some examples, give me a call. I'd like to discuss it with you. If you're able to show the direct impact, I'd like to hear it. I'm not seeing it. As of 2008, when the recession hit, ladies and gentlemen, the broadcasting business is off, 30, 40%. And, yeah. and I think that actually we're going through an extraordinary business change. I think that the economy worldwide now is, with the advent of technology, we're going through, I don't know, the consumer is changing. You know, the idea of...
well, the concept of consumption is changing.
Well, yeah, but I think the idea of analog business is become obsolete.
Yes.
And it's hard to predict what you, the consumer, will buy or get. The idea... Look, I come from a penny saved is a penny earned, and you get saved, do something for a rainy day. The idea of buying anything like an appliance and saying, oh, I'll have to get another one in 3 years was just something I'd never think.
Yeah.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I bought a house that had a washer and dryer in it that was 30 years old. Still working. Used to be, look, I could take you to a stove in New Orleans that my aunt bought in early 1900s. Still working. Has a clock on it. What is it? Something, merit, something. Well, because it works because it's all, I guess, mechanical, analog. I mean, you light the pilot, and the pilot turns on. There's no computers in it, so therefore there's no motherboard to go out, so therefore you throw it away. So, you know, I'm all over the board here with this, folks. I am. Because as I see what is happening right now in my country, and especially with this, I can see that this whole tax thing is the usual manipulation, and I just don't know. I don't know where it ends up. The only thing I can count on and look at is where we ended up before, be it during the days of Ronald Reagan, during the days of George W. Bush, how we arrived at the recession. And it's as if we've learned no lessons from it. And you, good God-fearing Americans, are too busy trying to stay ahead on your bills and living above your means that you just simply go with it. You know, before the recession, I was broadcasting and I shared with my audience, I guess it was some foreshadow. Well, it wasn't deliberate, no prediction. But I shared with my audience that the problem we have in America was our debt crisis. The plastic has become now counted into our economy. If you make $20,000 a year and you've got a credit card that max out at $5,000, what is happening here is that the assumption is Americans are now spending all of that 20 plus 5, and you're going deeper and deeper in debt. But now that's a great contribution to the economy, one can argue, because you borrowed $5,000 extra dollars you didn't make. So that means you put that into the economy. But this is before the crash now. I said the greatest bubble is our debt. And I checked just recently, and we're going back there again. You guys are living above your means. You are maxing out your credit card. You can't get ahead of the debt collector. You owe more than you make. And there's no end in sight because you're steadily building more debt. And, you know, now this has become more important to just get credit, which brings me to my president, Donald John. This is what this whole tax plan is based upon. You're going to get the money. It's going to come. All we got to do is cut the taxes, and guess what? All the money's going to come back, and the factory's going to be open. The polls are showing that only 14% of those great businesses that we would like to have here are even contemplating increasing, expanding. Actually, most of them are cutting back, just as Sears. I mean, retailers for sure. GE is laying off 12,000. Well, and really the reason is because they can do more things with fewer people. I mean, you can, folks. As we speak, we're on maybe 20 some odd radio stations between ABN and this broadcast. I guarantee you that to do that, it may involve maybe 10 people in each of the different locations, from Natchez to Atlanta. I guarantee you. Only have one operator there in the midst of 1, 2, or 3 stations. It takes fewer people to do more things. So I'm trying to, this whole trickle-down thing, I'm just But what Donald John wants, and what he has convinced you of, is the Keynesian theory of economics, and that is basically use somebody else's money. So he's saying, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give tax cuts to the very rich, and we're going to utilize the money that the middle class and lower will provide to operate. And by doing so, we'll build bridges and we'll increase the defense spending and so forth. Or will we? Well, because the money's going to come. It's just not going to come from us. Because we got a tax cut. We're the rich. We get a tax cut. It's not going to come from us, but it's going to come. It's got to come. And so then the next idea here is to convince the hardworking middle class and lower class that they've got to now spend more. They've got to now put in more service fees. Trust me, it's coming. The gas tax is going to go up. I can tell you that. That's going to happen anyway.
So as prices go up, these paltry cuts that we may see for these next couple of years will be spent anyway.
Absolutely. All right, folks. I know. Talking economics gives you a headache. We'll be back.
The Jackson Advocate newspaper has been the voice of black Mississippians since 1938. The Jackson